I'm John Heilemann.
And I'm Mark Halperin. With all due respect to Hillary Clinton, if you need a place to explain what your campaign's all about, you might want to consider a certain hit political TV show.
With all due respect.
On the show tonight, Baltimore, its former mayor, and its Orioles. But first, Hillary Clinton. She announced her campaign in a video a few weeks ago in which she didn't say much of anything about what she'd do as president. She then did some small-scale events in Iowa and New Hampshire that many felt were equally unenlightening. But today, for the very first time, she took to a stage, a very big stage, an actual stage, and gave a very big speech about criminal justice here in New York City at Columbia University. This was a major speech in the short history of Hillary for America. For one thing, she was darn good.
Indeed, it is a time for wisdom. For yet again, the family of a young black man is grieving a life cut short. Yet again, the streets of an American city are marred by violence, by shattered glass and shouts of anger and shows of force. Yet again, a community is reeling, its fault lines laid bare, and its bonds of trust and respect frayed.
John, we're going to look at more of that speech later in the program, talk more in detail about it. But your first cut on how Hillary Clinton did in her first policy speech as an official 2016 candidate.
Well, let's start by acknowledging the fact that I and you and many others have been very critical of her in her campaign launch for having it be substance-free, for not laying out more of a policy agenda. And yet here she is, stepping forward with this Baltimore situation still playing out, the worst of it hopefully over, and seizing the agenda on a big issue. I thought the performance was strong. I thought the substance was a little bit thinner, but the timing was impeccable, and you got to give her credit for being out there in the lead.
You know, we don't want to politicize the tragedy in Baltimore, and we want to pay our due to that as we have been all week. But I have to say, I think from a purely political point of view, a performance point of view, a campaign point of view, this was the best day of her campaign to date. A very strong speech, very well written, and she made it clear to people that she was showing them her heart. I thought this was the most authentic, emotive she's been, and a well-thought-through, well-crafted speech off teleprompter. I thought, again, just the pure politics of it, the best day of her campaign to date.
And turned around quickly and well. I mean, the speech was, if you read it on the page, the speech is a well-written speech. It's clear that her policy shop has been working on this even before the Baltimore flare-up happened. I'm just impressed by it. I think that it not only showed off her and her heart, as you said, and I agree, but also showed off her team as being on the ball.
We're going to talk about some of the policy ideas she outlined in her speech today and look at more of what she said and how she said it in our next segment. But for now, we want to move on to the other potential presidential candidates also speaking out today. Almost everybody has weighed in one way or another. Today in Baltimore, the former mayor of Charm City, Martin O'Malley, who flew back to deal with the crisis, talked to our Dave Weigel in the Sandtown neighborhood about his reaction to the latest events.
You have to every day do a better job of policing, a better job of policing your police, a better job of intervening earlier in the lives of young people at risk, and also a better job on expanding drug treatment. The anger that's erupted in America's cities has a lot to do with the underlying hopelessness over whole swaths of our country and inside cities. It's about the unemployment rates. It's about a lack of summer job opportunities. It's about wages that have been declining for 12 years rather than rising.
Another somewhat emotional reaction today from Ohio Governor John Kasich. He signed an executive order creating a 12-member panel for a task force that he proposed last year after the protests in Ferguson, Missouri, and in Cleveland. At a signing in Columbus, Kasich talked passionately about uniting his state.
We are going to heal our communities. We are going to get ahead of the curve on what we have seen in other parts of this country. It is not acceptable to have these divisions between our friends in the African American community and law enforcement. It is not acceptable to have a gap. We will bridge this gap, and it will take everyone to participate in this. We don't want to have people in the streets burning buildings, hating one another. We have to do this. It has to work, and it will work.
Senator Ted Cruz spoke out a little while ago and laid some of the blame to the events in Baltimore on President Obama. He said President Obama has divided us and inflamed race relations. John, these are just the latest reactions from the potential 2016ers of what's going on in Baltimore, race relations more generally. If you look at the range of people, the three we just talked about and others, who beyond Hillary Clinton is handling this well and who is not handling it well?
Well, I think John Kasich, who we just saw, that was a very nice speech on his part. We know John Kasich has done a lot to increase his support levels among African Americans in Ohio. That speech that he just gave, not a speech, but those comments he gave, clearly emotional and very strong. I mean, he's going to have to look hard at the Cleveland Police Department if he wants to be serious about this. I think the worst of them is Rand Paul, who I know has said a few things lately, but his first reaction about riding by Baltimore and saying he was glad he didn't have to stop and get out of the train while things were at their worst, that's been the worst reaction so far.
Yeah, the flip reaction, people have not looked at particularly well. Jeb Bush has responded, but not really been outspoken, certainly hasn't done what Hillary Clinton did today. And this is a national moment. And I think Hillary Clinton today set the bar for people. Martin O'Malley's in a kind of an interesting position. Certainly people are scrutinizing his record as mayor, but he's going to have to figure out going forward how to turn this into a positive moment. This is the kind of situation that he would normally thrive in. All right, moving on. Staying with Baltimore, the city is still not back to normal. The clearest sign of that occurred today at Camden Yards. Afternoon game between the Orioles and the White Sox in a nearly empty stadium. There were no fans allowed in. Press coverage was limited. Here are some of the weirdest things we saw and heard in today's game, starting with during the pregame, the announcers Gary Thorne and Hall of Fame pitcher Jim Palmer.
There will be people outside who will be looking in for this ball game. Why even play the game? Well, the answer to that, I think, is both Buck Showalter and Adam Jones both said we do want to try and bring some kind of normalcy back to the city.
All right, so no sooner were the commentators done. The game gets underway. The Orioles have a big first inning, 6 runs, including this home run that you will see rattling around in the right field seats.
1-1 delivery. You didn't get a hold of that one. It is deep. Will it stay fair? And goodbye. Home run. Chris Davis delivers a 3 RBI homer.
So the fans were kept outside, but some of them clustered by the gates to watch the game, peering through. The players inside the stadium kind of made light of the odd situation they found themselves in. Orioles catcher Caleb Joseph had some fun. He waved to the imaginary fans and signed some imaginary pretend autographs. The saddest thing of all about the game probably was all those foul balls. Normally give that fan a contract is what they say in Camden Yards, but the foul balls just hit and rattled around and nobody got them. All right, the Orioles ended up, by the way, beating the White Sox 8-2. Unusual, really unprecedented move by Major League Baseball. John, did they do the right thing, continuing the game but not letting the fans inside?
I know you and I are going to disagree about this. I think it was the right thing to do. There was no easy, simple, or obvious solution to this problem when they had to make the decision. It wasn't clear what would be happening in Baltimore come game time. And I'm, as a baseball purist, my view is there's 162 games in this season. You got to get them in at some point. And with the rain and other things, I don't want to have the World Series in mid-November. So I'm for getting these games done.
Baltimore needs normalcy. They need people to get back to a regular routine. Playing the game under these unprecedented conditions was absurd. The league should have found a way to schedule this game some other way. Pick up a doubleheader down the road, whatever it is. Travel, play on an off day, whatever. I think it was a horrible decision, which they did basically for money and to try to not inconvenience the teams. Bad idea for the city of Baltimore, which is getting back to normal in almost every other respect but this one.
Like I said, I think there's not a good solution here. This was an odd situation. There's no doubt about it. But I do think that you're overstating the case a bit, Mark. I think no one's even going to remember this in Baltimore or anyplace else about 3 or 4 days from now.
They may not, but it's freakish. I want everybody in the city to feel like it's the Baltimore they know. And giving them a baseball game with nobody in the stadium, the players signing imaginary autographs, is ridiculous.
And things will be back to normal. Things will be back to normal tomorrow.
All right. Coming up, more of Hillary Clinton's speech today. We give you a greater, bigger look. And then John's interview with Brian Grazer and why he likes meeting famous people so much. That's Brian Grazer, not John. We'll be right back. Candidate Hillary Clinton visited Columbia University today for a big old speech about criminal justice. She was a lot like Bill Clinton, more than usual. We're going to play a fair amount of the speech for you, talk about what she said and how she said it, starting out with her at her best, a well-written speech delivered more in poetry than in prose.
We will have to overcome deep divisions and try to begin to replenish our depleted reservoirs of trust. But I am convinced, as the congenital optimist I must be to live my life, that we can rise to this challenge. We can heal our wounds. We can restore balance to our justice system and respect in our communities. And we can make sure that we take actions that are going to make a difference in the lives of those who, for too long, have been marginalized and forgotten. Let's protect the rights of all our people. Let's take on the broader inequities in our society. We can't separate the unrest we see on our streets from the cycles of poverty and despair that hollow out those neighborhoods.
John, it shows she's already got a speechwriting operation up and running that is very professional. And maybe I'm just reacting to how relatively uninteresting and bad performance she had in her initial campaign events. But I was interested in what she had to say, and I found her delivery compelling. And I'm trying to think of a speech I've ever heard her give that's as good as that. I'm sure there are some, but that was quite good.
It's funny, you just stole exactly the thing that I was thinking as I saw this video, Mark. I thought back to the 2008 campaign and tried to remember, besides a couple of very fiery speeches she gave toward the end, including her concession speech, there were not very many where she was that good. And in some ways, these are trickier to pull off, this kind of speech, because it's not just about fiery and being a fighter where you could just do raw emotion and heat. Here you had to kind of convey compassion and as you said, poetry, not prose. That's nothing she's ever been particularly good at. I thought she was very good at it today. You know,
like Bobby Kennedy in '68, like her husband, rising to the occasion and matching the emotion of the moment with her own emotion, very effective. All right. In the newsroom today, we're all listening very closely as we listen to this speech for any specific policy proposals that Hillary Clinton might bring up. Here is some of what she put forward.
We should make sure every police department in the country has body cameras to record interactions between officers on patrol and suspects. That will improve transparency and accountability. It will help protect good people on both sides of the lens. If the United States brought our correctional expenditures back in line with where they were several decades ago, we'd save an estimated $28 billion a year, and I believe we would not be less safe. You can pay a lot of police officers and nurses and others with $28 billion to help us deal with the pipeline issues. It's time to change our approach. It's time to end the era of mass incarceration. We need a true national debate about how to reduce our prison population while keeping our communities safe. And please, please, let us put mental health back on the top of our national agenda.
John, not hugely programmatic with the exception of the camera thing, which is, of course, not a new position for the country. Right. But framing the issues in a passionate way and in a way that made her priorities as president, she's president, clear.
Look, again, I think, you know, the being out in front on this, it's the case now that there's a bipartisan consensus for big reform in this area. Everyone from Rand Paul, Ted Cruz, Chris Christie, everybody who wants to do something. I'd like to see her be bolder and more programmatic on mandatory minimum sentences, on sentence disparities, and going more hard at the core of the problem, which is the racial disparities. But I do think that this is a good first start, and she's ahead of everybody else in terms of framing it, as you said, which puts her in a good position to flesh it out more as we go forward in the campaign.
Yep, and part of what she has to do is deal with the legacy of her husband and the crime bill. He passed an issue Indeed. We're going to be talking about here in the coming days. Finally, Hillary Clinton spoke several times today about racial inequality in the U.S. justice system.
There is something profoundly wrong when African American men are still far more likely to be stopped and searched by police, charged with crimes, and sentenced to longer prison terms than are meted out to their white counterparts. There is something wrong when a third of all black men face the prospect of prison during their lifetimes. And an estimated 1.5 million black men are, quote, missing from their families and communities because of incarceration and premature death. There is something wrong when more than 1 out of every 3 young black men in Baltimore cannot find a job.
Her husband was a master of talking about race. The current president sometimes struggles. She was very strong on there.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for, and she's going to have to say a lot more.
Yep. All right, we'll talk more about Hillary Clinton, obviously, the rest of the week. But right now, after the break, we go start grazing. John's conversation with Hollywood mega producer Brian Grazer is up next.
Yesterday, I had the chance to sit down with Hollywood super producer Brian Grazer at his home in Santa Monica. Grazer's hit movies include Splash, A Beautiful Mind, Apollo 13, and my personal favorite, Kindergarten Cop, as well as TV standouts such as Arrested Development, 24, and Empire. He also has a new book out called A Curious Mind, The Secret to a Bigger Life. I asked Grazer what inspired him to write the book.
So for 30 years, what I've done is created this discipline that I've adhered to. Every 2 weeks, for 30 years, I have met a new person that's expert or renowned in anything other than entertainment. So science, medicine, technology, politics, athletics of all types, every art form. And I meet these people and I have a conversation with no agenda, and there's no ask. They can't ask me to make a movie about their life, and I can't say to them, can I have a job if they're, if they're Carlos Slim or any of those. It's just one of these things where it's pure. You're just trying to learn, and you're entering someone else's sort of life process and their expertise, and it's a conversation that can last from an hour to 3 hours.
If I read your book correctly, I believe it's true that on the same day, if I was following the chronology correctly, you did a screening at the White House and this is 2005. You did a screening at the White House where you screened something for George W. Bush.
Correct.
You met John McCain.
Yes.
And you met Barack Obama in the Senate. So that's a kind of amazing day.
That was an amazing day.
I want to hear about that day.
Well, because I had this process of meeting a new person, every 2 weeks, when I had the opportunity to go to the White House to have when I had the opportunity to go to the White House to show Cinderella Man to George W. Bush for a White House screening, I thought, well, I've got enough time, and I've kind of got some credibility because I'm going to be at the White House to meet 2 senators, and so I thought I'm going to meet John McCain, and he was in office number 2, Thomas Jefferson office, which was like this lavish office that you would imagine was this big state senator's office, and then I thought to myself, I'm going to go meet Barack Obama, and he agreed to do it. And I went to, they said, get on a tram. So I went and got on a tram, and I went to office number 99, and his office kind of looked like the Department of Motor Vehicles. You had people coming in and out, and mariachis, and big hats, and things, and bags of groceries. But he was such an awesome guy. It was like he was operating, made himself available to everybody. He had a very democratized way about the way you would experience him.
Well, let's talk about those other guys for a second. George W. Bush came across as what? You thought what of him?
I thought he was really friendly.
Yeah.
Really friendly, and I just told his daughter today, Barbara, when I spoke to him like this, he moved shoulder to shoulder. So we had to stand, I was standing like this, shoulder to shoulder. It was a very buddy thing that he did with me. It was kind of cool.
Yeah.
And then he did one other thing that I pointed out, is he didn't feel the need to socialize a lot. Like he went and got his food himself.
Right.
He sat down alone. He would have been okay alone.
Yeah.
He was kind of just happy to do the job of the president. He didn't need to showbiz up to people.
Right. Okay, so what was it like meeting McCain?
McCain was serious. Not a lot of humor. I was able to relate with him very easily because I'd spent a lot of time in Vietnam prior to even meeting McCain.
Right.
And look, I'd met Veronica De Negre, who was tortured in Chile, and she had a big role in offering me insight into why I should make Apollo 13, because that was about survival, and that's what she did. So I had commonality with him. He wasn't a big small talk guy.
Yeah.
So
plus, he was suspicious of you because he thought you were a Hollywood liberal.
Maybe, I don't know.
And did you have any sense that as you went from one office building to another office building in the Senate, this is 2005, Barack Obama had only been in that building for some number of months because he only got elected in the fall of 2004, so McCain had been around for a while. Did you have any sense that, like, it's weird that you picked the two guys who would run against each other for president like 3 years later?
I didn't know
that's
that.
That's kind of like, that's kind of, a little, either you're really prescient or very lucky.
I was very lucky. It was a trifecta of a day.
Right.
And you're very smart, because I hadn't realized the time parameters, that it was that close, and that ultimately they did connect, of course, in running against each other.
And did you have the impression that, some of your colleagues out here in Hollywood or some of your peers, a guy like David Geffen who saw Obama in 2004 at the Democratic Convention was like, that guy's going to be president. I'm going to, eventually, whether it's this time or next time, he's going to be president. I want to be behind him. I'm going to give him a bunch of money. When you first met Obama then in 2005, did you walk out of that office thinking this guy could be the next president of the United States?
Yeah, I thought so.
Yeah.
But I wasn't like David Geffen where I knew it. David Geffen knows things, and he's right, 99% of the time.
Often.
Yeah, often.
Often enough.
Yeah, I didn't have that level of conviction. I didn't have a vision like that.
Right.
I just thought he was amazing and had like a savant at communication.
Right. So you spent some time with the Clintons.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So, Bill Clinton seems to me to be, whatever you think of him, pro, con. Most people are both. Like, he's complicated.
Yeah.
Clinton contains multitudes.
Yeah. I'm pro Clinton.
Yeah.
I'm pro Bill Clinton.
But just talk about the time you spent with him.
I've had many opportunities with President Clinton to talk for quite a long time about many different subjects. And he usually takes over and has these amazing anecdotes that are 20, 30-minute long stories that are awesome, actually.
Yes, there's usually always a payoff at the end, too. That's the thing.
There is. He's brilliant.
Yes. So you've spent time with him, you've spent time with her, right?
Yes.
So when you look at the two of them, what do you think, compare and contrast to them?
President Bill Clinton is a very relaxed communicator with an intellect that is beyond belief, and he doesn't put that in your face.
Right.
So he has a lot of available subjects, and he's willing to roll with you like that. Hillary Clinton, in my limited relationship with her, she's a surprisingly good listener. And she's able to listen and integrate what you're saying or what you said hours ago into the end of what she's, into the crescendo of our conversation. So she's brilliant in a slightly different way.
Our thanks to Brian Grazer for providing the show with a little bit of star power, but we have more stars on the way. Tomorrow we'll get a brief on British politics from our special UK elections correspondent, the one and only John Cleese. And then on Friday, my interview with self-described pornographer, pundit, and social outcast, the man behind the hustler empire, Larry Flynt. You will not want to miss that.
Last time he was here, we got Texas Senator Ted Cruz an ice cream cake. He's coming back on the show tomorrow for a talk. But for now, as President Obama would say,
Konnichiwa.
and as we say here, sayonara.